Cool, everybody, Coach Rab here, and welcome to another Kilted Chess Noob episode. No, I'm not a chess coach, not even close. I'm a health and wellness coach that happens to love chess. But strangely enough, on today's episode, there is actually going to be a little bit of coaching involved because I'm trying to showcase what I've learned along the way. Now, if you're anything like me who is trying to get better at chess, but isn't quite one of these super masters or somebody who's been playing it constantly all their days. I mean, I learned when I was younger, didn't play for 30 years, decided to get back into it now. Some people have been playing every day, all day, for every year in between. They will see things that I don't. Now, what we'll talk today about is the king and rook endgame versus the king. Now, that is a 99.9% winning endgame, right? The odds are gigantically in your favor. However, my biggest fear when I get to an endgame like this is that I lose. Now, in this endgame, you technically can't lose. You would then draw or stalemate. But given it's a winning endgame, you can have, you can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, basically. And that's always been my biggest concern, is that I'm in the position, I should win, and I do make a boo-boo, and I get a draw. Now, in this particular position, for those that know, the three main ways you could end up with a draw. Number one, his king or her king could take your rook and it ends up king v king, stalemate. You cannot checkmate. So that's one way you can do it, right? Number two is a draw by repetition. So sometimes if you put them in check and they just keep moving back and forward, I think it's the rule of three same repetitive moves, game over, draw. And the third way is if you put that king in a position where it's not in check, but it can't move anywhere because it put itself in check, and therefore by default it becomes a stalemate draw. So there's three ways to lose that winning position, and I'm going to give you a way that I learned to guarantee the win, and it works obviously with the queen as well. Now, of course, you're saying, well, it's easy to checkmate king and queen, but when you're a noob, you get into these positions, it's very often you drop the ball, you guddle it, and you're like, oh my goodness, and especially if you're playing a time game, the pressure's on you. Whereas this system, I find very, very smooth, very, very clean, and I've been beating, I've set the bot to 3,200 and I can win every single time. So basically, I read it in this book, Beginners, I'll just put the book up, forget the name of it. I was reading this and I came across this particular method. Now, I know that the author of this book probably didn't invent it. Chess has been around for hundreds of years, right? So I'm not going to pretend that this author did, but that's where I read it, so I'm giving credit to where I saw it. So basically what you do is that you make use of your rook, of course, but then you also make use of your king, of course. Now, in the first 2/3 of a chess match, the king is usually, it's like, protect the king. But in the last third, when you get into the end game, the king is a weapon, all right? I mean, the king has, has a lot of attacking squares around it. Granted, only one in any direction, but it does act as quite a force, and it can also move in any direction too. So the analogy I want to use for this one, or for this particular method, and this is how I keep it clean in my head so I don't guddle it, is imagine you're trying to catch your dog in the garden because it needs to go in the bath. You've already said the B word and your dog's smart enough to say that's not happening. And you and your partner are trying to corner your dog, okay? So the king is going to be me. Now, because the king can control a square either side of it as well, so as it's shown here with the arrows, now, it can obviously control the squares behind it, but for the purposes of this lesson, just focus on what's in front. The king stops anything going into that square, stops anything coming into the square in front of it, and also the king that square. Now, of course, these side ones, but for the purposes of this video, let's just focus on these three. Now, if the king was you as a person, think of those other two squares as your hands, and you're trying to herd your dog in to get a hold of it by the collar, so get it into the bath and get it washed. The rook can be your partner. Your partner is effectively like closing down the area, making the area smaller. Now, top experts will tell you the easiest way for a rook and king endgame is to make a box and keep making it smaller. Now, I tried to learn that. And yes, when you've got all the time in the world, that works. But more often than not, I was closing the box. I was never sure if I had to move the king or move the rook, and then I'd guddle it and the king would escape and it'd reset the process. And I just found it wasn't clean enough for my inexperienced brain. So this method, I find very, very useful. So there's something I'm going to tell you that, again, chess experts will know about, something known as opposition. And it's when your king, the two kings face one another. Now, right now, our kings are in opposition, but granted there's 3 squares in between, but they are in opposition. Now the key to this particular method I'm going to show you is that you want your opponent to step in to opposition. So imagine like you're trying to chase your dog, and if you go right, they're going to dart right. You're like, ah, and you're just going to keep chasing them across. Eventually, you want them to step in from your hands so you're then able to grab them. So keep that in mind. You want them to step into opposition. And when that happens, if they're further down the board or nowhere near an edge, you create a check, which pushes them back, and you advance the king, and you do this all the way up. Or if they're at the edge, that's at the point you deliver your checkmate. Okay, I'm going to show you what I mean by this. So first and foremost, it's white to move, keeping things nice and clean so you don't guddle it. I always move my rook over to one side, okay? Now it's a 3,200 engine. Their king has moved down. Now, what we want to do initially is you want to cut off the king. So I'm going to move it up to square A3, and it cuts off the king. Therefore, the king cannot come any further forward. So first and foremost, I'm going to cut off the king. Now, the king is naturally going to make a beeline for my rook. Now, your first rule of this one is to make sure rook safety is paramount, or if your rook gets gobbled, game's a bogey. But your king is a weapon, so you want to start bringing the king across. Now, what's happened now, their king has just done me a favour. He's moved back again. So guess what? When he moves back, you cut him off. Okay, so you've made another one. He's just done me another favour. Now, don't worry about your king. You can always march your king back later. The quicker you can get that king, your opponent's king, onto the back rank, the better. Right, so he's moved up, so we're going to do it again. Now he's moved across. He's risking taking my rook. So this is where you're like, no, protect the rook. Just slide it across. He's going to start going for that rook. I'm going to take advantage, bring king forward, okay? Now what's going to happen? He's running. Now, this is where I was talking about the dog thing. He's running away from my king. So I'm going to chase him a little bit. He's run back. Now, see that? He's now in opposition. So I'm chasing. He's now facing me. He's stepped into opposition. Now, remember that the king, if you use the analogy I was saying with the body and the hands, covers those 3 squares. So if I put him in check now, that king cannot go here. If I put him in check, the king cannot move down on any of these squares because my king's creating opposition. It forces him back. So when the king steps into opposition, you put him in check. He's got no choice but to go back. Now, I always move forward on a diagonal. The reason for this, the geometry of the board, because you want your king stepping into you, you don't want to automatically come right back into opposition because he's then just going to step out. So I always just step slightly out and he's going to run, okay? So I chase him again. He's stepped into opposition. See that now? So he's in there. You're herding in. So you put him in check, and guess where? He can only go back. So again, I'll bring my king forward. He's going to probably make a beeline for the rook. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slide this rook all the way across, keep it safe. He's coming back again. I'm going to put him in opposition. He's going to run. And then what I'll do is I'm going to have to move this rook again. Now, the reason I had to do that is that I kind of made a small mistake there. It's all to do with the geometry of the board. You want him stepping into your opposition. And I would always have been chasing him there. So I'm going to chase him to the edge. When he gets to the edge, guess what? I step here. He's got nowhere to go. He stepped into opposition once again. So this king is protecting these 3 squares. He can't go. So when you put him in check, it's checkmate. Game is a bogey. Okay. So with that one, your main concern is the repetition, right? So you got to make sure you don't keep repeating moves. If he keeps escaping your grasp, then do a sort of in-between move with your rook. So just slide your rook across or whatever you want to do, or even just move it 1 square so long as he's nowhere near the king. Give yourself a bit of a breather. And then when he then moves, chase him then so he steps in to your opposition. Now, you can actually checkmate him in the middle of the file so long as you're on the back one, just the way it can work out. If he steps into his opposition, now a 3,200 bot won't. He'll force you into the corner. But this is a nice, clean method of doing that. So again, I'll just go again. So you put the rook across. He's bringing it down, cut him off. He's going to jump up. So he's done me a favour, cut him off again. He's jumped up, cut him off again. Now he's cutting across to bring the king. He's going for my rook. Keep your rook safe. He's jumped up, cut him off again. He's making my life easier. Now when he's moving towards my rook, bring your king up, okay? Bring it up. Now we need to be careful about the repetition here. Now he's into opposition. Put him in check. It's going to force him up. And I'm going to go this way just to keep him away from that rook. Chase him across the board. Now, is that going to be right? I'm going to be here. He'll go in. Yep. He goes in. I box him in. He goes into opposition. Nowhere to go. Checkmate again. Nice and simple. For me, that is the easiest way. I actually now use that when I'm using the queen, just to the boxing in part, and I just keep that in mind. I know a queen, once you get close on edge, you can get straight in. I just sometimes worry that I get the queen too close and get a stalemate. I'm not as good at them. I'm a chess noob. I'm trying. But I find that this method can every single time get the victory. And the last thing you want to do is snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. That is really frustrating. And then afterwards you watch game review and you're like, why did I do that? Ugh. That particular method. So again, if you ever struggle to remember this, just think about you trying to catch your dog. If your dog goes that way, you're going to chase them. They're just going to keep going that way. You're not going to catch them until they step in to face you, and then you'll be able to catch them. Now, granted, in this game, unless they're on the back rank, you're not going to quickly grab them, but that's when your partner pulls up, puts them in check, forces them back, and you just push them up the board. The same works coming down the board or even over to one side, but for easiness sake, you can get this going. It works as well when you've got pawns on the board, so long as they're not in any complicated position. I've managed to be at 3,200 with a couple of pawns on the board, but the endgame knowledge will grow. But that is a method. It's just nice and simple, nice and clean. Cut them off. Protect your rook. Bring the king in. Get your opponent to step into opposition. When the opponent steps into opposition, when it's facing you, put them in check, force them back. When they're on the back line, push them along to the corner. As I said, with the geometry of the board, if they keep avoiding you, just do an in-between move with the rook, and then that way the geometry of the board will allow you to eventually get them to a position where they step into and checkmate. But be mindful of the 3-stroke rule, the repetition. That's easily done in this position. And again, in the early days, I lost games like this. So I say lost, drew the game because, I got into a position and just didn't know how to finish it. Or there was a few times I beat them by accident. I was like, right, I know I need to use my king, box them in, and just because this is clean cut, you feel like you're in control when you do it. So give this a go. And like I say, all credit to the book, but how to get good at chess, how to win at chess. I'm going to put it up here. That's where I read it, and I thought it was such a clean way to do it. Easy enough for me to remember. And remember, with everything that you learn in chess, regardless of who teaches you it, it's the method that the best method that you remember the most, and that you could use it when under pressure. And that's what it comes down to, isn't it? When you're playing any sort of game, or you rehearse a skill and you're playing a sport, or whatever you're doing, when you're put under pressure, it's how you react. And if you've got good solid training that you can fall back on, you're like, oh, great, I know how to do in this position. And when you get to this, a king and rook endgame, it should be game over for you. You should win. But there is many, many times when you guddle it. I've seen it guddled before, and you're just like, oh, what a shame. This method will stop that from happening. So I hope you all found that useful. I hope the analogy worked with trying to, you're with the king, you've got your person, and you've got your arms outstretched. So just remember, your king is a weapon too. And in that position there, like I say, the king is covering 3 squares. Think of that. I know the king, you typically just think can only take on 1, but it actually protects. Well, it protects more than 3 squares because it protects, it protects 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 8 squares around it. I really should have known that. But ultimately, in this particular method, you're only worried about pushing forward. But just remember that. Push forward, make use of the rook, and your rook is well out of danger. And so long as you keep an eye on the geometry of the board, you will then master this one, no problem at all. I would recommend, if you go into chess.com, you can go to learn, I think it's analysis, set up a position. You can throw the king anywhere. You can put the king or the opponent's king anywhere. Remember, the closer they are to an edge, the easier it becomes, because your rook then cuts them off in the shortest position and boxes them in. I was showing you it from quite far down the board just to give you lots and lots of examples, but practice that. I've rehearsed that over and over and over now. Like I say, I put the bot on the maximum rating. With this position, it won't matter what size of bot you do. You should win every single time if you're paying attention. So I hope that was helpful for you. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe if you found this useful. And have a great week. Bye-bye.